You are about to receive messages that may be harmful to your mental state. Your sense of reality will be questioned. Your view on things will be altered. You are now part of the meta. The meta controls everything. The meta determines what will and will not happen. You are watching the Metashow.
Welcome everybody. It is Saturday, February 22nd, and you are joining us for the Metashow. I'm Brisk Rubal, your host, along with the Matani.
Yes, I am. To the very first comment about this, I am wearing a tie and I am wearing a blue suit. And because fashion is very important, I feel like I need to explain myself to our loyal viewers as to why I'm not wearing red. A very good friend of mine, Nimblar, is getting married in California in several months. And as part of the bridal or the groom party, we're supposed to wear blue. And so this is literally the first blue suit that I have ever owned, because blue is not really my thing, but I figure I'm going to experiment with it and see if I can come up with like a way to turn a blue suit into like an angry, aggressive, power suit. Like I normally would be wearing black and red or something like that. But, if I can make a blue suit look aggressive, I got to find a way. So this is part of that experiment. And new fashion stuff. I feel really weird because I have a wire running up my back. I've never felt more like a political flack until right now. Like I, get a freaking chyron down at the bottom of the screen as if it's like Fox News or MSNBC, because I've got this thing on. So Brisk is teaching me his weirding ways. So I'm gonna get that out of the way so everybody understands why I look so fucking weird today. And yeah, so Brisk and I are going to do a little tag team today. I want to introduce this because a lot of times at the start of the Meta Show, we will do a rant. There will be a Brisk rant, and then there will be a Mittens rant. And I have a rant this time, and we'll get to that in a bit. But if we're going to do good cop, bad cop, then today we're starting off with Brisk, and he gets to be bad cop. I get to be good cop. It's a weird thing. Yeah, exactly. So take it away, Brisk. Let's hear it. What do we got?
All right, so this week, as you guys saw, we had some changes that were dropped, and unfortunately, those changes were not dropped in a fashion that we would approve of on the Meta Show, meaning that everybody was told about it. There were patch notes put up ahead of time. People discussed things. We said, this is good, this is bad, and then the CCP makes a decision on whether they're going to put it in the game. They didn't do that. What they did was they made major changes to how you can roll wormholes, for example, and they just stealth nerfed it into the game without even really mentioning that it was a thing. And unfortunately, this had a major impact on a lot of the wormholers who were obviously upset, given that they had just been given a From Wormholes with Love update, and all of a sudden, major changes were made to a game mechanic that they had been relying upon for years. And CCP's only response was, well, this was intended. We were fixing something that was broken. So my rant today is about Emergent gameplay. EVE Online is a game that has, at least in the past, embraced the idea of emergent gameplay. What I mean by emergent gameplay is CCP provides us with tools. They say, this is the way that the world works. We're not going to give you a path or a choice or a quest chain or anything like that. You decide what you want to do with the tools we give you. You make the game. And even if what you take and use and the way that you take and use it is not what we anticipated, we'll embrace that, because that's the whole idea of playing a game in a sandbox. That's what has allowed the creation of giant alliances and giant coalitions and the massive big fights. And if you go back and you listen to CCP developers, including Hilmar, over the years, talk about EVE and how it has changed and evolved and players did things they never were expecting, they always embrace that type of thing. So what happened? Where did that go? Why are we suddenly seeing things that players have come to rely upon for years? For example, how you roll a wormhole, the ability to do it. Why is that changing simply because suddenly CCP is deciding, well, that's not what we intended? When did they start fixing things around the idea of based on what they intended? That's never been a CCP thing. That was always, you want to scam? Go ahead. We're not going to stop you. You want to be a pirate? Go ahead. You want to go out and extort an entire alliance? and take care of that because that's the gameplay that you want to do, go ahead. We'll embrace that. And this is what happens in games like this. Whenever there are bugs or things that are not intended that just happen to be in the game, players will take advantage of it. And as long as it's not something game breaking like a dupe or some other type of bug that gives somebody such an incredible advantage that it's essentially cheating, most of the time in the past, CCP has just said, "All right, this is fine. We'll let you guys do it." The fact that you can even live in a wormhole is not what CCP intended, but that's the way the game has played out, and that's how we've adapted to it. The adapt or die mentality has always been about Eve, but not anymore. Apparently now we have changed that, and I want to know what happened. When did we stop being in a sandbox game? When did we stop thinking emergent gameplay was okay? When did it become CCP's thing to say, well, we didn't intend you to do that, so you're not allowed to do that anymore? That is antithetical to the Eve that I started playing 14 years ago.
Oh, God.
I think it's antithetical to the way that a lot of us have. So I'm kind of frustrated, and this frustration is mounting. And I think the mineral and the mining changes coupled with this change, it says to me that there's a new CCP out there, that there's a new philosophy that they have about the game, and it's not the one that we have grown to love over the years. It is a much more thumb on the scale, authoritarian. You're gonna play the game the way we tell you to play the game, and if we don't like it, then tough. And I don't like that. That bothers me, and I think that's not the right path that they need to be going down. And I'm hoping that by bringing this up now, we getting this conversation started about emergent gameplay and whether we still think that's a good idea. Hint, yes. That maybe we can stop these guys from doing anything else that would have a major impact on the game down the road. Now that's my rant. I hate to be negative multiple weeks in a row, but what I saw Tuesday, I mean, that just shook me to the core because that's not what this game has been about. And if that's the road we're going to go down, I think it's pretty bad. So anyway, that's it. Mittens, if you want to go ahead, let's take some of the sting out by giving them a little bit of praise, I think.
All right. I mean, I think that just to sort of vibe with what you're talking about there before I go into saying a bunch of nice things. Again, this is sort of uncharacteristic. I'm wearing a blue suit and I'm playing good cop today, so everything is weird. But they're really good examples of. I often will touch on Digital Extremes as a great example of a company that produces a persistent online game, that being Warframe. And Digital Extremes, when they see players doing something really weird, like back in the day when people figured out ways to essentially like fly through the air with their space ninjas at high speed by just doing power slides in the air and just doing all sorts of crazy, flying ninja shit. And it wasn't intended the way that they had the parkour system at the time. And instead of saying, no, you can't do that, because obviously the players were having fun with it, they just added a system to do that into the game, right? They looked at what the players were doing from an emergent perspective, and they said, okay, the players like that, let's give them more of it instead of taking it away, right? And, it's funny with CCP, because this will be the segue into my little rant, because there are actually a couple of really good examples of CCP in some capacity doing this recently. And this was not the focus of my rant. When we got together and we planned the show a couple days ago, I was going to be spending most of my time talking about the Frigate Escape Bay, which I am like over the moon excited about. But we also had a good example of emergent sort of accidental gameplay. Is CCP has announced now that they are going to be reintroducing filaments into the game. And if you missed the memo, the filaments happened by accident. Essentially, it was like a random idea as a Christmas promotion, and a filament lets you basically press a button on an item that you have in your spaceship's hold, and it will take up to 25 people and teleport your gang into some random place in nullsec where you will inevitably have a fight. And it's not game breaking because it's up to 25 people, so you can't really like do a major strategic thing, and it's randomized, and it's just a way for people to smash spaceships together. And I think that that's an example of something the player base loved it so much and asked for it to be made permanent. And that's a positive example of CCP saying, hey, this is a thing we did, the players are latching onto it, and it's a lot bigger than we expected, and let's codify it like Digital Extremes does with Warframe, and add that to the game. So that's sort of a positive contrast there. But what I really want to talk about is how much I love battleships and frigate hulls. And like, you guys rarely get to see me out of space politician mode and just nerding the fuck out about spaceships, but I genuinely think that the idea of the Frigate Escape Bay is one of the coolest things that I have seen added to EVE Online. We don't have it yet. We don't know all the details, but just the very idea of it. Like, if you've been playing this game for as long as I have in whatever capacity, right, you end up hearing a lot of just standard discourse about the ideas that people have about, you know, maybe we should have a SOV system that adds like a recon element of it, and such that there's varying levels of information based upon iHubs, right? That's something that people have been talking about for years. And the Frigate Escape Bay is a genuinely novel idea that I have never seen or heard of. And apparently somebody just, I don't know, they just came up with it and were like, hey, this would be cool. And I think that there's a lot of layers why this is cool. And so I'm going to be spending my entire rant today just heaping praise upon CCP about this particular feature and why I think it's so badass. So there are, classically speaking, two types of hulls that you do not see too often in fleet fights in EVE Online at the Alliance doctrine level. You don't see too many frigate fleets, and you don't see too many battleship fleets. And there are good reasons for that. It's actually kind of, I mean, right now, Goonswarm and the Imperium are having a lot of success using Typhoon fleets. But essentially, the era of the battleship saw a lot of competition as EVE grew, when they introduced T3 cruisers, right? This was many years ago, but when you could run around with like a whole bunch of like, you know, Lokis and shit like that, or Tengus, in a lot of ways, it was much more efficient at the high level of Alliance fleet combat to utilize a T3 cruiser instead of a battleship. Similarly, you don't really see that much use for frigates except for support fleets, things like fuck you fleets, which are like E-War throwaway fleets, or like tackler fleets or harpy fleets and things like that. Like, they're an element of the gameplay, but there you don't really see, hey guys, besides small support vessels, you're not really saying what's our optimized Alliance level Inyo fit, right? Like, what are we doing here with a heavy tackler? What are we doing with this? What are we doing with that? And I think that the Frigate Escape Bay thing is so cool, not just because it adds at a level of emergent gameplay, but at a certain level. And you know, I'm just a spaceship turbo nerd, so this is my personal view of EVE Online. And when I see like battles and movies like Star Wars and things like that, is that the biggest and most badass ship of the class should be getting used. So if you're talking about subcapital vessels, you would think that at the highest level of gameplay, if you were designing the game from the ground up, that you would see battleships. And back in the day, during the Great War and all these things, you'd see these huge battleship fleets smashing together, and it was glorious fun because, you know, it's kind of like a dreadnought fight. They're big, they're slow, they're not going anywhere. When two battleship fleets engage, like, sure, you can have a sniper meta, like we do sniper rocks and sniper maelstroms a lot during the Great War and shit like that, but you know, there was carnage. There was just fucking carnage. Battleship fleets, when they interact with each other on the field, there's death everywhere. And that's awesome. And it's a challenge because, again, T3 cruisers. But now, the other type of class of ship that you don't get to see much of in terms of doctrines or use at the, hey, here's 1,000 people trying to kill each other. You're not going, oh man, what are we going to use for our Inyo fit? What are we going to do for our cruiser fire? What are we going to do for all of these ships that just don't make it to these macro level battles? And what I think is such genius about this with the Frigate Escape Bay, and again, I hope that they don't fuck it up, is that essentially it breathes life into two very important doctrines in the subcapital meta in EVE Online. And they are both exciting things because you can have a battleship, but if your like second choice for running a battleship in a mainline doctrine is like, well, I wish I could bring my Logi, but it's more important to have a battleship. Well, you put a T2 Logi frig in your battleship hull. Okay, great. Now you get to have battleship stuff, and then when you blow up, you can help repair. If your heart is in being an E-War guy, but you know that your alliance needs a battleship doctrine, you're in your battleship, but you have a fucking crucifier or something hidden in there. So it essentially allows a level of individuality and personal gameplay choices, and it will extend fleet combat if CCP does it right. Because now, instead of just getting volleyed off the field and you're in a pod and then job done, you're like, okay, well, I'm going to lose my battleship. And then after I lose my battleship, then I'm going to get into this other thing that I chose that I think is cool, and I'm going to do some cool stuff. I have to stop myself because you guys, I don't think, have ever really seen me herf serious fucking blurfs about how much, like, I started out as a frigate jock because I'm a fucking goon, right? So like back in the Syndicate days, just running around in like Merlins and Rifters and shit, like old school Great War era stuff was all frigates, and battleships and these huge ass scraps. And I can't say enough nice things about it. I'm excited. Like, I'm watching my people talk and scheme about like, ooh, okay, so let's put like a Drekovic or something inside of a battleship, or we're going to do this, or we're going to do that. And like it adds this whole additional layer of like metagaming and doctrine stuff. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay. I gotta stop.
No, look, I'm excited too. I can't wait to see this. I think it's going to add another layer of complexity to the game. And hey, you know what? Getting battleship fleets back, I think that's a great idea. I love it. We don't take as many out as we used to. We have we will take out, Max every once in a while. We'll take out Abaddon's and some others like that, but generally speaking, we don't take a lot of battleship doctrines out anymore. I've had a lot of fun on the Typhoon fleets with Goons and the GEF. That's been fun. But if this means we're going to start seeing a lot more battleship fleets hitting each other, that'll be great. I'm looking forward to it. So I think it's going to be good. All right, everybody, we're gonna change things up a little bit. Last week's episode ran long. We had a lot to talk about on the top story, so we did not get to our Piercing the Corporate Veil segment. So we're gonna do that first this time, and then we're gonna be joined by Drone Wang of Ranger Regiment. So let's knock this out, and then we'll talk to our friend.
Hell yeah!
Hello.
Not yet.
Hello.
All right, here we go.
Nice to meet you.
I want to talk a little bit about Pearl Abyss's fourth quarter earnings call. It was last week, and generally speaking, I think, frankly, if you are an investor in Pearl Abyss, you're probably happy right now because they seem to be doing pretty well for themselves. The company overall has had a significant increase in their revenue over all of 2019. They've seen a 33% year-over-year increase. They earned $455.3 million in revenue last year, and of that, 134.4 million of that was profit. So that's a pretty solid revenue. In terms of Eve, and I'll throw it up on the screen here. This is the only information that we have about how well Eve is doing, because Pearl Abyss is publicly traded. We finally get earnings statements from them again. And as you can see on the screen, fourth quarter for Eve was the best quarter that Eve has had since Pearl Abyss has bought the company. They did 15.6 billion Korean won. That is the equivalent of $13.1 million. That's up from about 1 billion won from the third quarter. And in the end, over all of last year, Eve produced $50.5 million of revenue for Pearl Abyss, which is, I think, pretty respectable. I think that's kind of what they're looking for. The one thing, having listened to the call and having watched everything, that I was most surprised about is they didn't talk about Eve at all. I mean, they did not talk about Eve in any kind of specific way during the main presentation. They acknowledged the number of how much the revenue was from Eve itself, but they didn't talk about CCP. They didn't talk about Project Nova. They didn't talk about the Project Nova process being changed and how the London studio is changing the name of it, and they're going to keep working on a sci-fi, FPS, but they didn't talk about any of that stuff, even though we had heard from some CCP developers, at least, that they thought that maybe it was going to get mentioned on the call, but it wasn't. When they were asked by investors at the end of the call about Eve Echoes, they punted and said, well, NetEase is doing that, so you got to go talk to them. So in the end, despite the call being an hour long and Eve representing a pretty significant chunk of revenue for Pearl Abyss over the last year, and making pretty respectable numbers, $15 million for a 16, 17-year-old IP is not bad. And I think it's pretty stable. And it's the best. I mean, we saw the best fourth quarter that Eve has seen in a while, and that's even after all of the nonsense with the blackout. And I think it's pretty clear that the reason why the numbers were up higher is because of the Korea rollout. I think that brought a lot of new players in and a lot of revenue to the game that offset whatever was lost because of the blackout. So I think that's a good sign, and I think it says, at least right now, Eve is going into 2020 in a pretty healthy position in terms of financial numbers. Now, the other thing that I think is pretty key based on this last call, Eve is an afterthought for Pearl Abyss. It is a place to park money It is not something that they are spending all of their time worrying about. And as far as I can tell, they're also not spending all their time worrying about CCP coming up with another successful IP. I think they would have mentioned Nova if they thought that was a concern, or they would have mentioned it as a way to pump up, potential investors from saying, hey, look, we've got all this other stuff in the pipeline. They talked about all of their other stuff. They talked about their other MMO, their other announced IPs that they're going to be using to expand BDO, and they talked about those in detail. And they also talked about how those are going to be at E3, but they didn't talk about anything related to CCP and stuff that CCP is doing. So for everybody, and we've said this before, but I'll reiterate it because it seems like every time we do a conversation on these ratings calls, what demonstrates to me is Pearl Abyss is not interfering in the game. They are not putting any pressure on Hilmar or anybody else at CCP to change the game to fit their way of doing business. They're essentially saying, CCP, go do your thing. Whatever you want to do is fine. We're not here to tell you how to run your game. Just go ahead and do it. So all the fear that people had that this was suddenly we're going to see all these kinds of crazy microtransactions and there'll be cat ears on every ship and all this other kind of stuff that was talked about. And even then, you'll still see comments on the official forums of people say, well, Pearl Abyss must have told them to do this. They're not telling them to do anything, at least not as far as I can tell. And frankly, I don't know why they would, because as long as the game is making money, as long as CCP is hitting their numbers and providing what essentially PA wanted, which was a way to diversify their revenue. And I'll throw this back up on the screen because I think there is something important here to show you. If you look at the revenue by region and how it has changed, and the revenue by platform and how it has changed, the company was getting the bulk of its revenue from Korea beginning fourth quarter of last year when they bought CCP. Now, it's only a quarter, and the bulk of their revenue is coming from North America, EU. That, I think, is a testament to EVE and also to the fact that BDO, I think, is becoming a broader, more Western-friendly game that people want to play. And then they also introduced console, and that has increased, the platform numbers. But I think in the end, the reason why they bought CCP, as far as I can tell from the outside, is it was a good investment. It diversifies their portfolio, and it provides them with a steady revenue stream that they don't have to worry about and don't have to focus on. That's what they bought it for. And so far, seems to be working. So that's what I got. That was the fourth quarter earnings call. I think it's pretty solid news for us, and I think we can keep moving forward operating on the impression that we don't have to worry about Pearl Abyss coming in and messing with the game, because they're not. Mittens, you got anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to sort of reinforce what you say. There has been, like, from an EVE metagame perspective, the leadership of alliances are obviously very interested in what is happening with CCP at, like, the C-suite level, right? We're always sort of keeping our eye on, what is Hilmar saying in public? What are his, who's up, who's down? It's kind of like old school Kremlin watching. Like, we're trying to figure out, who has the badge, who is fighting crime, what's going on. And, the fact is, once we realized that Pearl Abyss had this massively successful IPO, and that they essentially were looking for safe places to park that money, EVE makes a lot of sense as a place. If you have an IPO for Black Desert Online and Pearl Abyss, and you have $1 billion or something like that, you can't. This is the thing. Like, if you've ever tried to deal with large amounts of money, you can't just go to a bank and say, "Yeah, we want to park $1 billion here." Right? Like, that's not how big money works. You have to find assets that you can buy that are going to be relatively stable. And CCP actually makes a lot of sense in that context. And I personally was very worried that Pearl Abyss was going to come in and do all the things that we were afraid of about Black Desert Online. And then I was confused and even more afraid at a certain level, anxious about it, because I couldn't figure out what their investment strategy was. Because why would you buy something and it being so hands off? And then we did a little bit more research, and the evidence continues to accumulate that it is a portfolio distribution strategy to basically take the IPO money and buy assets and make sure that it's stable. And my attitude when it comes to the question about Pearl Abyss, Hilmar, and all of these other questions about CCP is basically, we as a player base only really need to worry about the high level business politics. I mean, I find it interesting. I look into this shit anyway because I think it's neat. But as long as the financials are telling us that EVE is profitable, that the player population number is growing up, that Pearl Abyss is happy, and CCP is putting new sand in the sandbox in the form of like these frigate bays or adding filaments in and things like that, then, you know, I don't really need to care what's happening at the CCP sea level, because it is only a concern for the players at this sort of like business level. We only really have to be concerned about what CCP is up to when the numbers are plateauing or when the numbers are going down. And so regardless of any politics that you might have about like the blackout or like being mad at whichever dev you dislike or whatever, the lovely, brilliant, awesome thing about the Q4 2019 numbers that we got from the PA call is the numbers are going up, which means we can just go back to mashing spaceships against each other and not worrying so much about like microtransactions, cat ears, or like a big corporate shakeup, right? Like they bought CCP because it's stable and it's not going anywhere. So we don't have to worry about them wanting to make it go anywhere. And in fact, we can suggest that we can anticipate that in scenarios where CCP does something really dumb, Pearl Abyss would potentially, you know, not necessarily come in and like run a lawnmower over the C-suite, but they would at least have a stabilizing, correcting force to protect their investment. So I think that it's very rare that we get genuinely good news about the health and welfare of EVE Online. And again, I'm delighted to play good cop. Like this is awesome. We both Brisk and I get to play good cop here on this segment. We're delighted to see. Remember, guys, EVE Online, CCP, Pearl Abyss, they are businesses. If they do not make money, we do not have a video game to play. It ain't a charity. So if they're making money, we're happy. The more sand in the sandbox, more players. So that's my view on that. I think it's about time for us to let's bring in Dronewing. I think we're going to go to our top story here. I'll do a little introduction here. Actually, Brisk, why don't you press the button? We'll do the top story, and then I'll introduce Dronewing. Alrighty there. So here's what's happening. Probably the biggest like political news in EVE Online currently is the fact that the Imperium has, for the first time in I believe 3 years since we let Snuffed Out in, allowed new alliances into the Imperium as a coalition. And we've brought on a Ranger Regiment, and we've brought on some of their allies in Iron Crown and Dracarys. And I'm delighted to have as a guest on the show Dronewing. And I also want to just have an opportunity to say on live TV on the internet, Dronewing, over and over again, because it's hilarious and I love it. Anyway, Dronewing is Drone. Yeah, it's fantastic. A really cool guy. We've been talking a bit on Jabber. And so I'm basically just going to introduce him and start asking a few questions. It's basically like, Dronewing, hey, you're awesome. Your alliance is really cool. We got to watch some of the Chinese talk shows that you guys were doing and like get a real sort of insider look onto what you guys thought about the Imperium and EVE on Tranquility. And just to start things off, if you could just introduce yourself, say hello, and tell us about how you first got into playing EVE Online.
Hi everyone. I'm John Wang. Or you can call me Monitor Wang. I can tell you the story where the name come from. Once I fight enemies with Hands of Vampire, he asked me, "Hey John Wang, what is your fleet ship type? Eagles or rattlesnakes?" And my fleet voice channel was noisy. I mistaken it as what's my ship style. So I said, Monitor. Then after a long silence, I got a new name, Monitor One. So so Ranger Regiment have a secret fleet, Monitor fleet.
I love it.
I started playing EVE Online at 2012 in Serenity. And I started in Tranquility at 2017. I look forward to fight with you side by side in future. Thank you.
We're delighted to have you on board. And what we're going to do here is just Brisk and I are going to tag team. I'm going to ask you a question. Brisk's going to ask you a question. And I have like, I told people this on the fireside here, just so people understand, but I have been instructed by some leaders in the Chinese player community that I would learn a lot more about the Chinese player base if I watched a movie called Crazy Rich Asians. And so tonight, actually, I'm going to be getting together with my girlfriend. We're gonna watch that for cultural understanding purposes. Brisk, what do you got for him next?
Well, I was hoping, Drone, if you could just talk a little bit about Ranger Regiment. Give us the background on the Alliance, how big you guys are, how old, how you got started, just so folks get a better idea of who Ranger Regiment is.
Okay. Our alliance started at 2017, including our friends the Aquarius and the Iron Crow. We have more than 5,000 characters, and our alliances have gone through 3 passes. First, we joined Winter Coalition, and then we staged in Detroit at first. When we knew that Nora's planned to backstab at us and annex us, so we run away and joined GOTG and the staging branch and Tenor. And then we have a long war in GOTG. So at last we decide to leave and join Imperium. I think yes, it's not long history of our alliance, but we hope to create more in the future.
Nice. One of the reasons why I was happy to accept you guys and sort of snap up that chunk of the Chinese player community is that war and struggle is a test in EVE, obviously, especially because you spent a long time playing on Serenity beforehand. And I'm gonna actually go off script here because we've got a bunch of questions that we had in advance for you, but I want to dive into the Serenity stuff, which is, you played on the Serenity server for a while, and now you've played on the Tranquility server for a while. And I'd be curious to hear your perspective about is it different over here on Tranquility? What's it like having played for so long on Serenity and now coming to Tranquility? Maybe you could talk a little bit about the differences between the servers and the player bases, maybe something that surprised you. Tell us a little about that.
I think the most different things is the time zone, because we fight in Chinese. We are all in the same time zone, and we fight on 8 p.m. and offline 11 p.m. and so and then we come here and we find we have people everywhere in 24 hours. I think it's the most differences. And then at first we think we have many supers in Serenity, and we come here and we find it's a lot more than we knew. Yes.
I think that your point there is pretty valid. One of the things that's interesting, if you compare Serenity to Tranquility, is got to be the fact that Serenity is only going to be a single time zone server, or at least the time zones in China. But for the rest of EVE, we got to plan on a 24-hour a day basis. That's got to be a big culture shock when you guys came over here to figure out, you got people playing 24 hours a day, and it's not always easy to know, when the fights are going to happen.
Well, when we play, when we in Chinese, we always do some secret things in about 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. And if we do these things here, I think we only see more and more people than AUTZ. I see.
One of the questions that I have is, very few alliances can be involved in a defensive war for multiple months without breaking and running, right? Like, so one of the things that really impressed me about seeing you guys' performance in whatever the hell we want to describe the mess that is the Galactic Northwest right now, is that endurance and that durability and fighting a very long sort of defensive war. One of the things that was fascinating to hear about on the Chinese version of the Metashow, the recordings that we were getting, where I think you were on a show with Miss Rabbit and Gone with Wendy and talking about some of the background here. Maybe you could talk a little bit about, was there like an attempt to create a cross tranquility, like a global or a galactic united Chinese community? It sort of reminded me of the old like Russian attempts to make Red Alliance. If you could talk a little bit about why your organization ended up with Deadco / Guardians of the Galaxy.
When we were in Detroit, we deployed very fast. We developed very fast and healthy, and then Winter Coalition started the war without tell us, and we just know it on the Winter Coalition Alliance meeting with other members. And when we fight with Legacy, the corps in FRT try to recruit our members, and North didn't stop it and even encouraged it secretly. Hey, do it! It's a good thing. So at last we decided to leave, and Windsprit introduced us to Soul Dragon. Yes.
Gotcha.
That's a story.
So would you characterize basically that your biggest Ranger Regiment's biggest opponents have traditionally been fraternity, or is it? Do you have other folks that you would say you guys are traditionally opposed to?
Ranger Regiment don't want to make enemies. We are a friendly group. We always want to make friends with everyone. But if someone's backstab or do dirty things behind us, we will know it and we will remember. And the debt must be paid. So yes, FRT is our opponent. Norris did this to us.
That's fascinating to me because I say something. I didn't know you were going to answer that way, and that's fascinating to me because one of the things that I often say in like public statements and diplomatically is the policy of the Imperium and Goonswarm Federation has always been to be the best possible friend and the worst possible enemy. So when you're saying that we'll be friends with everybody who's willing to be friends with you, but if you fuck with us, we will remember and you will have to pay that debt. That really kind of resonates with me because, that's how I run my little section of the Space Empire. Like that is like one of the guiding principles of Goonswarm and how I try to run the Imperium. So that's really cool. One of the things I wanted to ask you, we had on this, but I think you might have just answered it. But if you could go into this a little bit, is why did everybody wants a Chinese time zone now in Tranquility? You need to have a presence in the Chinese time zone in Tranquility. Otherwise, because there's so many Chinese players, you guys will bring hundreds of Titans and murder zone anything in your way. So we're delighted to have you and your friends on board in the Imperium because we need you guys to help work together with us in order to solve all these kind of problems. But I'd like to hear maybe why did you and your group decide to join why the Imperium? Why us, if that makes any sense?
Yes, first of all, the Soul Dragon is a good leader. He gave us a lot of help on everything since we joined GOTG, and everyone in Ranger Regiment appreciates and love him a lot. After we joined GOTG, we keep trapping in the war for almost 2 years. At first, we fight Imperium, and then Hold and BL, then Panfam, then Snuff, and then Panfam again. So our members need some time to relax and enjoy the game, and not just get online and forming like a war machine. They want more fun, not only the boring impulsive war. So we finally decided to leave. What we want in game is the same what we want from Alliance. We want to make more friends here. It's very happy. In our Alliance, we have many funny guys like Domi Typhon who likes to say, "Hey, send me your photos. Oh, you're handsome. Let me kiss your little face." So
Oh, why? You own. This is fun, dude. I'm really glad to have you on board.
Love
You're a character, and it's just a fucking blast. Like, yeah.
When we blue ball, we will sing goo 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 to celebrate it.
Nice.
That's awesome. The Imperial March. I love it. That's fantastic.
So when we meet in real life, we will have every CEO to put on woman dress, and
There you go.
Also, I have some too. So if I want, I can tell our funny story for the whole day.
That sounds good to me.
So we want everyone in our alliance to have a good time in this game, and that's what we hope to gain from this alliance. And that's why we chose Imperium, because I think we have the same culture. I think we are harmony with each other inside.
That sounds fantastic. And also, one of the things that I am hopeful of, because quick pitch here to everybody, in addition to the topic at hand, there is going to be an eVegas this year. One of the pieces of news that has happened in the last couple of weeks is that eVegas has secured a venue. We're doing eVegas 2020. I will be there. A huge pile of people from the Imperium will be there. And we do hope that if any of our new Chinese allies are part of the Jet Set Fly Around the World set, that come to Vegas and party with us, and it'll be awesome. That'll be in October, and we're looking forward to it. Actually, I should, instead of just saying that thing about Vegas, I should have a question to ask. Okay. Actually, I got nothing. Brisk, what do you got?
So, all right. So one of the things that I wanted to ask, because this, I think, if you think about it, GOTG and then later Deadco, they've been fighting solidly for like 3 years up in the north, and for a good portion of that time, you guys were fighting against us, as in the Imperium and Goons and Lawn and Bastion and those guys, TNT. Did any of your members have any concerns about joining us after having fought against us for so long? Were any of the line members upset or worried?
No, we didn't. We have good fighting North before, and we respect the Imperium because Imperium wins the North War by strength, not the backstab or something else. So we were impressed by Imperium's superpower, and we admire it. So we always wanted to join Imperium in all the Chinese players. We have that thought.
Well, I'm flattered, so I'm delighted. This is fantastic. One of the things that we do on the show at the 15-minute mark is we go into what we call the Cool Kids Club, where we go into subscribers only mode and we take questions for chat as like a little benefit for our dudes. So I'm going to do that. And also, I know that you're doing things right here, and I know that we've made the right move in welcoming you guys aboard, because I am seeing some angry people in chat that I get to shoot, which is fun because I don't often get to commissar people anymore. So yeah, that's cool. We're going to go into Cool Kids mode right now, and I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I think what we need to do now, actually, because we are getting to the last 15 minutes of the show, Brisk, Drone Wing, please do stay with us, and we're going to be sort of talking about this as we go. But I think we're going to head to the Nullsec Power Hour, and we're going to talk about whatever the hell is happening in the Northwest. So Brisk, if you could press the button, and I will get us to subscribers mode.
And we're back.
All right, I'm wrestling with this. Bear with. Brisk, can you do you want to dive into the Nullsec Power Hour to start?
Sure. I mean, we could talk about. I mean, there's essentially a lot of stuff going on up north, and I think the fact that Regiment and Dracarys and Iron Crown have left Deadco and are moving down and have moved down to Delve and joining the Imperium. I think that's kind of the biggest news of the week, and I think that kind of puts a lot of pressure onto Sort and the rest of Deadco that are still up there, and basically them deciding what they're going to do. Now, I think we understand that at least the statements have been made or announcements have been made that They are at least withdrawing from Branch, and they've already withdrawn from Tenal. So I guess Declan's really all that's left of what was originally, the great North in Deadco. So I think right now, we're all trying to figure out, all right, what is Sort's next move? What is he going to do? Having lost, I think Ranger Regiment was one of the three top core alliances inside Deadco, alongside Sib Squad and Darkness. With Slice already leaving and a lot of these other groups going their own way, what's left? And can they really hold their territory, especially given the fact that PanFam has been stomping on them pretty hard, and now Test is up there as well. So I think we're all looking to see what the next move is for Sort, and I'm interested in seeing how quickly he finds a way to survive. Because if the one thing that you can say about Sword Dragon over the last 10 years or whatever, he is the quintessential survivor. There is nobody that is better of pulling victory out of the jaws of defeat than him. And no matter what, you just can't get rid of him.
He's the Energizer Bunny. He just keeps on going. It's true.
It never stops. So everybody calls him the cockroach in chat. I like Sword, so I'm not going to call him a cockroach, but I understand the reference. So, yeah.
After the apocalypse is over, or we get through it, no matter what, Sword Dragon will still be alive. But no, I mean, survival instincts are something that I think is underrated in EVE Online, because one of the things that you see about people shit on Guardians of the Galaxy or Deadco all the time, but to fight endless defensive wars, right, and to not break immediately, like people would constantly be attacking Deadco and Guardian. Deadco is what they call themselves, so I should call them that, attacking Deadco. Because they think it would be an easy fight, and it just is never an easy fight. Like, it lasts for a very long time, and Sword has been able to outlast foe after foe. And like, one of the things that we're doing up there, of course, is the Jeff deployment, the Goonfleet Expeditionary Force. And when we have JIF up there doing their thing, it's been a huge success. We've been really delighted by having an opportunity to send battleship fleets and sacrilege fleets up there. And it has been interesting also from like a nullsec power hour perspective, not just the power politics, which I can't really speak to, because when shit is going down in the nullsec autocrat metagame, as most people know, but I'll reiterate in case you don't, diplomatic conversations are privileged, right? Like, when Sort talks to me, or when Sort talks to any of our diplomats, or I talk to any other nullsec alliance leader, like, all of those conversations are privileged. That's like rule number one of the autocrat sort of smoke-filled back room. So, I do know what's going on. I think I know what's going on, but a lot of these things I just have to sit on my hands, guys. I do think what is fascinating we're seeing about the thing in the Northwest is these regions are falling as at the same time as you're seeing CCP nerfing mining across the board. There's like a big resource shakeup that's happening. And so one of the questions that I think is on the mind of a lot of us is like, okay, territories and quadrants are starting to change hands, but sort of an open question becomes, what is the value of the territories that are exchanging hands between the blocks? And will that value be retained in a month or two, right? Like, if all of the squares on the chessboard are changing color, it makes it very difficult to predict how these things are going to shake out, because you cannot predict the desires and the goals of the leaders. That's one of the thoughts I have on it. Brisk?
I think in the end, and like you said, unfortunately, given your role as the leader of the Imperium, it's hard for you to talk about stuff that's actively happening. And I don't have that problem, because I'm just a line member. I
exactly.
have no responsibilities here whatsoever, so I can say whatever I want. My only concern about Deadco basically pulling back at Declan and ceding all of that territory is who's gonna fill the vacuum, and I feel like if it's PanFam, that's fine, because at least then we have a buffer, a border or skirmishes we can keep doing. If it's Test or Legacy, that's fine too. But I don't want that. I really don't want that space just ending up, either being botting space or some rental alliance that goes in there, because that's not fun content for anybody. And we're not going to want to go up there and hunt if it's just a bunch of renters that are going to run away the second that you go up there. I mean, the reason why PF Tech and Jeff and the stuff that's happening in the North right now is fun is because you've got solid alliances like Horde and NC Dot and PL and test that are up there that are all fighting, and they bring fleets and they bring fights. And even if we're just skirmishing, still you can get good content pretty much 24 hours a day up north, and that's great. I would like to keep seeing that. But until we get an idea of where the next major war is going to be and who's going to be fighting it, this is the only show in town. And I think those of us who are primarily PvP oriented, which is me, and I think a lot of folks that are up there, at least in terms of who's in the GEF, the Goons Expeditionary Force, we're the PvPers, and this is great content. So I'm having a blast. I hope that it survives. Now I did have another question for Drone because we didn't get to it in the last segment, but I want to ask him now if he's still around. One of the biggest, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but I think we owe it to the viewers to talk about this because this is something that you guys have to hear all the time. You guys, along with Fraternity, and when the MER came out a couple days ago, I guess Friday, one of the things we saw, OASA beat Delve by a trillion-isk in terms of ratting income, which is the first time that I can recall that happening in a long time since, at least when goons were not deployed, and theoretically they're not deployed right now, so people can do whatever they want. The Super Cap umbrella, the Rihanna Sphere is in existence in Delve, so it's not like they're not covered. So this is the first time that I can recall that OASA was able to take over the top spot in terms of ratting income. One of the things that everybody always says is all the Chinese players are botters. All they do is bot. All of the OASA number is all botting. Ranger Regiment, they used to make jokes about sort. They used to call it Guardians of the Botters, GOTB, and things like that. Drone, can you talk about that? I mean, what is your response to the people and a lot of the assholes that were in chat as well, making the argument that all you guys do is bot? What's your response to them when they say that?
First of all, I want to stress that most of Chinese players are not bots. We love EVE Online and we earn everything by our own hands. We moved here within 2 years and we need to catch the skill point gap. So we need to write a lot and mine a lot, but most of us don't use both. So we follow the rules. But yes, very few of us use it. I mean, not Ranger Regiment, but some of our Chinese players, and they can't represent us. A Chinese saying goes, a red sheet spoils a pot of per region. So if there is a boat appear in Ranger Regiment, we will kill it and kick it after we confirm immediately. That is my attitude to the boat. But I'm wondering why the people who claim to use supports and recruits boat even banned because of it, but he can still run alliance or coalitions in EVE Online. So.
I'm not going to take sides on I guess I have kind of taken a side on the whole like Ranger Regiment, Fraternity, Norris kind of thing, but the interesting thing about that sort of dynamic is that, well, again, autocrat politics, I don't want to get into it, but I might as well address the whole like botting stuff too. It's an interesting question. A lot of people were asking it in chat, so Brisk, I'm glad you brought it up so we can deal with it head on. I reference the pie chart of shame a lot. And so for people that are viewing this for the first time because they wanted to come on and troll or just see what the hell was going on, the pie chart of shame is a graph that CCP released that showed which alliances had all the botters, right? And it showed which alliances had bans from CCP for botting. And one of the things that had been fascinating to me about the discourse in EVE Online is for more than a decade, as long as Goonswarm has been in existence, our enemies, as the whole Goons thing, have accused us of botting. You're botting, Goons bot, Delve is all bots, all this shit. And there's a couple points to address that. First of all, CCP's own evidence proved that this was not the case, and it just so happened that the people that had spent most of their time pointing fingers at Goonswarm and accusing us of being bots were in fact the ones that were guilty of doing it themselves. They were projecting. So it turned out that our noses were clean. And part of the reason for that is actually, there's a number of reasons. One, the Imperium is essentially like a technocratic autocracy with a lot of socialism involved in terms of its structure, with the safety nets and the way that we do things. And we just shoot people that won't obey. Right. So we have had within Goonswarm Federation, we've had an extremely large Chinese, mainland Chinese corporation called the People's Liberation Army that has been with us for years. And their shit is correct, because if you just make it very clear, you cannot get away with this here, or we shoot you, and then you do the actual purging, you commissar. Like, you guys see me shoot people all the time here in chat. Like, you have watched me live. Just I have no restraint when it comes to purging people that have to be purged. So I personally am not too concerned about any like, oh my God, people are going to come into Goonswarm territory and bot, because one, we'll shoot them. And two, if you think about it, instead of just having a knee-jerk, idiotic, like R-Eve level rage reaction about think about what you would have to do to try to bot a delve. It's an incredibly dense region. There's competition everywhere. It has the single highest concentration of hunters, people coming to delve to try to get easy content. It's a very dense region, which means that there isn't really an easy place to even try to run a botting operation. And goons don't like that shit, and they like to see me shoot people. So at a certain level, it's one of the worst possible environments to try to do that in a sustained way. And that's one of the reasons I think when you see evidence, as opposed to just the blurf that people want to put out in chat or herf about on Reddit, when you see things like the pie chart of shame, or you look at the monthly economic report, usually the hot zones for this kind of bullshit are in places like, the far outlying drone regions, or, the various areas of the galaxy where there is a very low population density and there's not much going on there. So even if we wanted to, which we don't, because I think that, botting takes away from the productivity that should be going to active human players that are then buying spaceships for human players that then go into our war fleets, where our human players kill the enemy's human players. I think it makes for a weak alliance if you allow that kind of shit. So we don't. So yeah, that's sort of like both Drone's perspective on that and my own. Thank you for asking that question, Risk.
You're welcome. And I think, like you said, I think one of the things that frustrates me with the botting charges constantly, as we hear these all the time, is that there always tends to be either a nationalistic or a racialistic impetus behind that stuff. When it's people complaining about the Russians, oh, they're all bots. People complaining about the Chinese, oh, they're all bots. So come on, guys. I mean, in the end, it's up to CCP to police the game, and they're going to do that. But we don't want bots in our territory any more than anybody else does, unless you're making money off of it, and some people do. For us, I'd rather have the physical players there. We don't need fake players making ISK.
Taking it away from real players.
Right, exactly. That doesn't provide us with any benefit. And as much as people love to make the jokes, oh, we're RMTing and all this other kind of stuff, guys, I've spent way more money on this game than I could ever make back, even if I was RMTing, and the same for Mittens. That's just not. We're not in this to make money. We're in this to have fun. This is our hobby.
Yeah.
Nobody's doing this to make money. Now, if I can transition, so we're almost at the end of the show. I have some very good news, and I think we should be able to take full credit for this. The Metashow should be able to take full credit for this, because if you recall my rant last week, I said when they added all of the fucking red dots, if you're going to add something new to the game, give us the option to turn it off. Period. And that was the bulk of my rant. And guess what? What's live on CC right now? Boom.
Are we
new
finally...
inventory notifications enabled?
Wow. Nice. That's if we're taking credit for it, hell yeah, go us. But regardless, thank God.
I am hoping now. I'm taking this at face value. It was on Reddit. I'm hoping that wasn't a Photoshop. We don't look like assholes. But if it's true and it is on there, and I'll go test it when the show's over, that's a good sign, and that at least tells me that CCP's listening. So that makes me feel a little bit better, because like I said, when you're adding new stuff to the game, especially stuff like that people find annoying, give them the option to turn it off. That's basic stuff. And they went and they did that. Thank you, CCP. And all of you who don't like the red dots, you can thank the Metashow for making this happen for you.
That's right. You heard it here first. The Metashow making red dots optional since 2020. So, yeah. All right, guys. Thanks a lot. I want to thank Drone Wing for being our guest. We're going to wrap things up here. And yeah, I'm looking forward to playing Good Cop more. I like it when CCP is doing things like responding to Brisk's rant. I love the frigate-based stuff. We are at a place in EVE Online, and I think this is very important. We're at a place in EVE Online where when we, the production crew for the Metashow, we get together on Thursdays and we're talking about what we're going to try to talk about. And we have great people. Like we've got Jay Amazingness, we've got January Valentine. We have a whole crew of people that are getting together and figuring out what the hell we're going to put on the show. And one of the things that's really neat is that now we actually have to figure out what we're going to talk about next week and push things off because, you know, a few months ago when we were having to deal with like the blackout shit and stuff like that, there was not like, there would be some weeks where we're like, fuck, what the hell are we going to talk about? Right. And so the fact that, you know, there's politics happening, spaceships are getting murdered, CCP is making money, Pearl Abyss is making money, there's more sand in the sandbox, there's frigate bays, there's, you know, yeet fleets are going to happen. I think that's a bad name, but puppies are going to call it a yeet fleet anyway, because Filament's right. I think Filament's coming back is great. It's great to be able to be in good cop mode. So tune in next week and you'll get to see us talk about more stuff because EVE is cool again. Hell yeah.
There you go. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us for the Metashow. We are signing off. And as always, you stay classy, New Eden.